Rachel Reeves went to Washington for the IMF meetings, opened her mouth about energy markets, and within hours billions of pounds have been wiped off British energy stocks. That is genuinely impressive. Most politicians take years to cause that level of damage. She managed it before lunch. Welcome back to British Reform. Let's get into this. So here's what happened. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, standing at the IMF spring meetings in Washington, announced that the government is planning to break the link between gas prices and electricity prices in what would be the most significant overhaul of energy pricing in decades. She called it quite a big change, which is the sort of understatement that makes markets immediately panic, and said it was absolutely the right thing to do. Markets disagreed. Loudly, FTSE shares dropped as much as 6.6%, the biggest single-day fall since September 2022. Centrica fell as much as 5.8%. Drax and Ørsted also slid. All of this while, as one analyst dryly noted, European markets were broadly higher on the same day. Britain's energy sector was essentially the only thing bleeding on the FTSE 100. That is a special kind of achievement. Now, to understand why the markets reacted like someone had just kicked over a wasp's nest, you need to understand how electricity pricing currently works in Britain. And it is, frankly, one of the most counterintuitive systems imaginable. Under the so-called marginal pricing model, the most expensive source of power needed to meet demand in any given moment sets the price for all electricity generated. And because gas plants are often that most expensive source, consumers end up paying more for their electricity even when cheaper renewable power dominates generation. So on a breezy afternoon when wind turbines are spinning beautifully and producing power at near-zero cost, you are still paying as if a gas plant somewhere had to fire up and save the day. It is like going to a buffet where everything costs the same as the most expensive item on the menu regardless of what you actually eat. Reeves and Energy Secretary Ed Miliband argue, and on this specific point they are not entirely wrong, that this system no longer makes sense when renewables are providing a growing share of power. They want to dismantle the marginal pricing model and replace it with something that reflects the actual cost of generation rather than tying bills to fossil fuel volatility. In theory, that sounds fine. Cheaper bills, cleaner grid, government claims the credit. Everyone goes home happy. Except the energy industry is absolutely furious, and their fury is not just corporate self-interest, it goes to something much more important. Here's where it gets complicated, and where Reeves runs into serious trouble. Both FTSE and Centrica have benefited from the existing pricing structure during periods of elevated gas prices, and any move to decouple the two could compress margins and reduce revenue predictability. That is not just bad news for shareholders. It is bad news for anyone who wants new energy infrastructure built in Britain. Because these companies do not invest billions in new wind farms, grid upgrades, and power stations out of the goodness of their hearts. They do it because they have a reasonably predictable model for making money. The moment you upend that model with a vague announcement at an IMF press conference, without a single detail of how the new system would actually work, investors flee. And when investors flee, the investment pipeline for the very energy infrastructure Labour says it desperately needs starts looking a lot shakier. Officials have yet to outline how a new pricing system would work or how it would balance investor confidence with lower consumer costs. But Reeves indicated further detail could emerge within weeks. Within weeks, she dropped a market-shaking announcement about restructuring the entire electricity pricing system and then essentially said details to follow. Imagine announcing you're going to redesign the foundations of someone's house and then saying we'll explain how later. The house does not wait. The market certainly did not wait. And this is the central charge being leveled at Reeves right now by energy industry figures who are not mincing their words. The criticism is not that decoupling gas and electricity prices is inherently wrong. The criticism is that you do not casually announce the dismantling of a decades-old market structure from a podium in Washington without a plan, without consultation, and without any apparent awareness that the entire investment calculus of every major energy company in Britain just shifted the moment you finished your sentence. The proposed reform aims to break the long-standing link between gas and power prices, a move that could lower consumer bills but squeeze energy company margins. And this shift comes at a time when households are already facing rising energy costs and market volatility. The timing 2. Is extraordinary. Britain is already in the middle of an energy cost crisis, partly driven by global gas market disruption. Energy prices are expected to rise further in July 2026, and Reeves has been looking at the possibility of providing targeted government support in the autumn. So on one hand, the government is promising future help with rising bills. On the other hand, it has just rattled the very investors whose capital is needed to build the renewable infrastructure that would actually bring bills down sustainably over the long term. That is not a strategy. That is a contradiction wearing a lanyard at an international summit. What we are watching here is a government that keeps reaching for bold announcements to distract from the absence of coherent policy. The announcement itself may not be wrong. Reforming electricity pricing is a legitimate debate. But governance is not just about what you decide. It is about how you decide it, when you decide it, and whether you have the faintest clue what happens next. Right now, energy bosses are asking whether Rachel Reeves actually understands how energy markets function, and the markets themselves have already given their verdict. If you want real reform in Britain rather than policy-by press conference, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe to British Reform, and share this one around. We will see you in the next video.